Hello there, my name's Adam Shaw, and I'd just like to introduce you a very special guest today that was suggested to me by Dr. John D. Martini as somebody that I had to speak to and had to interview around health issues. This is Dr. Bernie Siegel, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you for your time in this interview.
My pleasure, Adam.
Now, Bernie has written the book on miracles, and for people that don't know you, Bernie, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I would say became a surgeon for the right reasons. I like people, but then you realize you can't help everyone, and no one in the medical field helps you deal with loss and all the emotional issues. And so one of my patients redirected my life by saying she needed to know how to live between office visits. So I started support groups helping people live. And then coincidentally, you notice if you help people live, they don't die when they're supposed to. I mean, when they're feeling joy and their body gets the message, wonderful things happen. And Solzhenitsyn, in his book Cancer Ward, called it self-induced healing. So you never hear that term from a doctor. You'll hear, somebody could have a miracle or a spontaneous remission, but how about self-induced? And that's what I began to realize. And it's becoming more scientific now in the sense of, the messages we give our genes. So I've continued for over 30 years, really, helping people be survivors. I can't make them immortal, but if I can, somebody who says they have 2 months to live, lives 5 years, they're very grateful for the coaching and what it's done for them and helped them.
So this was literally a path sparked by one patient asking a different question.
Yeah. Yeah, I send out 100 letters to people with cancer saying, this is from our office, not from a stranger, saying you want to live a longer, better life, come to a meeting, because I wanted to empower them. And less than a dozen women showed up. And I realized I'm offering my patients a longer, better life, and they don't show up. It had a lot to do with their personalities and their fear of failure and guilt and blame and all kinds of things. So it really opened a whole new world for me to get to know the people I'm caring for in a different way, related to religions, how they were parented. I mean, a whole host of issues that really relate to how we treat ourselves and our disease incidents and everything else. So I call it now survival behavior. That there are people with the right personalities, and if I coach them, say it's not me, but it's me directing them. If you wanted to take up a new sport or something, you go to somebody who can teach you. And so I become the coach and the teacher and help guide them. And that's, with criticism too. If they're not doing it right, okay. I'm not telling them they're terrible, but I'm pointing out how they can do it better.
Wow, that must have been quite an impressive voyage, I'd imagine. And how were you received by the rest of your surgeons?
I mean, I have a house full of magazines talking about how crazy I am,
Yeah.
interviews and all kinds of articles. I've even been called satanic and occult because you teach imagery or meditation, who could take over the images. It's amazing when you don't understand other religions, what people are going through. But I'd say today, a lot of it has become scientific. You see that the effects of loneliness, it now shows that affects genes that control immune function. Cancer patients who laugh live longer. So suddenly, or even music in the operating room affects the comfort of the patient, the amount of drugs needed during the procedure. So all these things that I did years ago and was called crazy for, suddenly it's scientific only when belief systems change. You see, that's the problem. I was banging my head against the wall trying to get research because people thought I was nuts. So why would they fund research that seems crazy? But when people decide to do research to prove you're wrong and it comes out the opposite way, then interesting things happen. And as I say, and when belief systems begin to change and minds open, then research about emotional factors becomes more significant. And let me say this, that one of the things that I found very upsetting in a sense, I did a drawing for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she knew so many things about my life from this outdoor scene that, meant nothing to me when I drew it. But I mean, one example was putting snow on a mountain. And she said, "What are you covering up?" Which were all my emotions and feelings. And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You put snow on a mountain." I said, "Yeah, it's a big mountain with snow." She said, "Bernie, the page is white. You picked up a white crayon and added a layer. So what are you covering up?" And, questions like that. And so I went back to the hospital with crayons and found incredible things. I mean, people literally drew what was going on in their body without knowing what they were drawing. I mean, I could see the anatomy that they weren't familiar with. And when I wrote articles and sent them to medical journals, it came back. This is interesting, but it's inappropriate for our journal. When I sent them to where it was appropriate, it came back again. It's appropriate, but it's not interesting. Now, where was it appropriate but not interesting? Psychotherapy journals and psychiatrists, that they help people with their lives and then saw physical benefits. They worked with dreams, with drawings. I mean, I have never met a doctor who was told that, must be 90 or more years ago, Carl Jung listened to a dream and diagnosed a brain tumor correctly. All right, this patient didn't know what was going on. He told Jung his dream, and Jung said, "You have a brain tumor." And why don't we tell that to doctors and medical students? See, and then ask your patients if they had a dream, what's going on? Yesterday was Father's Day for us here, and I had a wonderful day. And in the dream last night, I won the lottery. Now, my feeling is it's about all our children. We have 5 children, and what a wonderful day I had. I haven't checked the lottery number. Well, it was Sunday, so there's no specific lottery. But I think, to me, it's like a lottery of life, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That the dream was saying, you got a great, you're a winner. Look at the family you have. And I think things like that are just so meaningful and wonderful, and medicine needs to use them. My next book is going to have more drawings. I got a publisher who's willing to spend the time and money putting pictures in, so that health professionals can see, in the drawing, just as people in the hospital would get interested in what I was doing because it was more interesting than an x-ray, to put up a child's drawing. I mean, a simple example. A child came in with large lymph nodes in her neck. Mother said, "Lymphoma runs in the family. I'm afraid my daughter has it." The daughter brought 2 pictures, one of herself with the swollen jaw, and the second was a cat with big claws. And I said to the mother, "Don't worry, your daughter has cat scratch fever." And she did. Now, you see, how does the child know to put that? And especially, this was a cat with big claws. I mean, it really was, obvious to me. But it's like this, again, intuitive wisdom. And I always say to people, or even in choosing treatment, that your intellect can say, "Oh, I need to do this." But your intuition may be saying, "That's poison. It's not the right thing." And so you have more side effects and problems. And then somebody else says, "Gee, I don't know if I want it." And their drawing shows it as a gift from God. That their intuitive wisdom knows this is right. Well, let me give you one more dream. A woman went to bed. She learned she had cancer. A white cat appears, says, "My name is Miracle, and this is the chemotherapy you should take." The woman wrote it all down, and her doctor agreed to do it. And years later, she's walking around fine. Now, she knows nothing about medicine and chemotherapy. Where does this miracle come from? Or a lady in the book, A Book of Miracles, said she goes to bed, a dark-skinned doctor, Asian-looking doctor with an accent, comes into the room and says, "You have a lump in your right breast, probably cancer." She wakes up, feels her breast, there's a lump, goes to the hospital, they diagnose it as cancer. While she's lying there, the door opens and the doctor from her dream walks in and talks to her about her cancer. Now, how does that happen? But again, we know past, present, and future. I mean that literally. I have children who've drawn the operating room they have never been in, and they draw a picture of it. I mean, a lot of it could be symbolic, but in a sense, lights could be 2 yellow objects, that kind of thing. But that has convinced me, as Jung said, that our unconscious prepares our future. So we know our future, but unless we quiet our intellect, we never get in touch with it.
That is amazing, really amazing. And I think for me, having been through medical training myself as a nurse, I'm guessing that when you did your training to be a surgeon, that they didn't tell you any of this stuff. So you've obviously come across this. How did you come across it, and who was your biggest influence?
Well, let me say this. I always say, if you want a good doctor, find one criticized by nurses, patients, and family. You see, because I learned from the criticism. I didn't make excuses. That when a nurse came over to me and said, stop bellowing, you're scaring everybody. If I wanted help or push the intercom, whatever. And I said, I must be the worst doctor. I said this to a nurse. I must be the worst doctor in the hospital. Everybody's telling me what I'm doing wrong. They said, no. We know you care. That's why we tell you when there's a better way of doing something. That really woke me up, because if you never criticize, it means they've given up on you. You're always making excuses. And I always say, whether it's somebody fixing your car or working on the roof of your house, if they blame your house and your car, go get another, mechanic or roofer. But if they say, I'm sorry, I missed something, okay, take a look. So I'd say, again, the nurses were a big help to me, and the patients, because they were living the experience. And that's another thing I learned. The people weren't living a diagnosis, they were living an experience. And I learned to say to them, what are you going through? They tell me in your words what you're experiencing. And those words always were about their life. See, if they said pressure due to some pain, and you wondered what's the pressure in your life, boy, their eyes would light up. See? Or what's draining you? What makes you feel like a failure? These are words that came out of people and had a profound effect in changing, their life. And again, I'd get back to saying that I began then reading, spiritual, Jungian, Joseph Campbell, mythology, to understand the symbols and what's going on in our lives. And even the themes, like the role water plays in various religions. And then you look back at water in certain myths and you begin to understand. Like I always point out, the still pond. I mean, if you're going to see who you truly are, the water has to be still. You see, if it's disturbed, you don't realize I'm a swan, okay? Or I'm a tiger because goats brought me up. I mean, there are various stories. But when you quiet your life, then things can begin to happen that become more healing for you, healing of your life. That's what I try to work on for people, not to focus on disease. I mean, one other point let me make. Mother Teresa was invited to an anti-war rally. She said, I will not attend, but if you ever have a peace rally, call me. That really hit home for me. See, that when we're fighting a war against disease, dying is a failure. You're a loser. No, you're empowering your enemy. Well, look at the world. You know what I mean? All the conflict we're in. What if we said, let's love each other. Let's make peace. Why waste money on weapons? Why don't we use it to make love? And that's what I found in patients' lives. That, if I said you have 2 weeks to live, what will make you happy? What's your chocolate ice cream? What can we do? It's amazing the benefit it then has on your body. The Monday morning, I always say, we have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses because of how you feel. And the body doesn't see death as the worst outcome. See, it's freeing you. You're perfect again. No disease goes with you when you leave. But if your body gets a live message, then it does all it can to keep you here and enjoying life.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to health?
I call it parenting, growing up with self-love. Yeah. One study of Harvard students here, if you said your parents didn't love you while you were in college, by midlife, 98% had suffered a major illness. If you said my parents loved me, about 25% had suffered a major illness. See, I don't know if it gets into the news where you are, but in New York City, the mayor said, let us reduce the size of soda bottles that are sold so people will take in less sugar. I would say then, why didn't he recommend we cut cigarettes in half, 50 years ago? I mean, that is not going to solve it. So you drink 2 bottles and you smoke 2 small cigarettes, it's I always say information isn't the issue. People need to grow up with inspiration. You need to care about yourself. You know what I mean? And so you make healthy choices because you have grew up with self-love and self-esteem. You know, as I say, it doesn't mean you don't have a quart of chocolate ice cream, you know, now and then, but you don't do it every night because you know it's not good for you, see? And I think that's the key. If people grow up feeling that self-love and self-worth, they think about what is good for them. When they don't, when they have see, the opposite of love, indifference, rejection, and abuse. When you grow up with that, you reward yourself with addictions, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol. You're trying to numb yourself and reward yourself. And, and even go out and create revenge and kill people and do all kinds of things. So I think if every child grew up with love, this planet would have no problem. I mean, you know, in the sense of our relationships, our health would improve, war would quiet down, you know, those things, because we'd have an inner peace and, what's the word I want? That Albert Schweitzer said, a reverence for life. You see, that's something, because I grew up with love that's been in me from day one. I found out, as a side story, that I'm always picking up worms and slugs and all kinds of creatures on the road to save their lives. You know, after it rains and they're out there, I'm putting them back on the ground and worried that people notice me and I'm, you know, nuts. And then I read Albert Schweitzer. He said he did that. If he saw a worm, he would pick it up, you know, an earthworm, and carry it and put it back on the ground. If he saw an insect in a puddle, he'd put a leaf in for it to crawl up on. Oh, boy, did I feel better. But, you know, if that reverence for life was built into us by the love and pets and everything, you know, that all life around us is considered significant and meaningful, then the world would be very different.
Oh, for sure, for sure. What do you think of? You've obviously worked with people who are about to die, I would imagine. And what are your experiences of people reflecting on their lives?
Well, I'm not sure what you're interested in the sense of the question, but I try to help people, as I say, feel loved. I try to reparent them, let them know I love them and care about them, and that their death is not a failure. My parents, in-laws, they didn't have any trouble dying, you know, with loved ones. I mean, when they got tired of their body, and that's what I try to help people. If you're tired of your body, it's okay to go. You know, that you don't have to die, as most people do in the hospital, 2 in the morning, when the doctor isn't here to stop me, because they see death as a failure, and my family isn't there to make me feel guilty, that you can die with the room full. Or if, like my mother doesn't want to die with her son in the room, that's okay. She had lots of friends with her. I mean, I know that she doesn't want to upset me, so I'll wait till he goes out of the room. But, to empower people to see that they have that ability to live and die, it's like a switch that's within us. And if they have that power, not letting others impose on them. And I mean at all ages, that people don't take your life away by telling you what they want you to be, what treatment they want you to have. One young lady drew a picture that says, "I hate you." So I thought, "You hate cancer?" She said, "No, the cancer and I are going through hell. I hate my doctor. They made me bald, ugly, and horrible. See, I want to stick a spear in my doctor." And the cancer was crying and saying, "Help me," in the picture. I mean, that's the sad part, that we have to help her to heal and help her to make choices. That's what I try to empower people. That if you want to eat vegetables, fine. If you hate vegetables, you want to have an operation, okay. I mean, do what feels right for you, so you never see yourself as doing the wrong thing or being a failure.
That's really powerful stuff. I mean, I had a bit of experience myself of looking after people in their final moments, and I found a really powerful transformation period for people.
And it's interesting. Later this week, I have to speak to a large number of nurses, and they asked me to talk about caring for the caregiver. See, let me ask you a question since you were a nurse. This is one of the survival questions. You're asked to do something by family or friends, and you don't want to do it. What would you tell them?
I would tell them how I felt. I found after time myself, Bernie, that I could be quite persuasive because it's a lack of information that causes people to do these things. One of my big things was putting terminally ill patients on drips. I thought it was barbaric, and all of the research indicated that it didn't help, and I'd seen the
Right.
results of that. So that was one thing that I had to deal with quite a lot. So I would talk them, I would educate them as
But
to.
would you say no to them? In other words, they're asking you to do something for them, and you don't want to do it. Would you say no to them?
I
I mean,
would,
see, you use sort of an intermediate. I'll educate them,
yeah.
but would you say no if they refuse to be educated?
Um, that's a good question. I was never in that position. I found I could be
Let
quite
me say
persuasive.
this: the survival answer is no. See, because think about it. If you say yes to what you don't want to do, you're saying no to yourself.
Yeah,
See, that's what I try to point out to people. And I was surprised at a nursing convention how many nurses said they would do what they didn't want to do if they were asked by friends or family.
yeah,
And I think you always, that's why in our training, we should learn more about our own personalities. See, why are you a nurse? Why are you a doctor? Why are you a plumber? It doesn't matter. Why are you doing landscaping? I mean, I've met landscapers who chose that profession in order to avoid people. Then they realize they have to work for people. Or a veterinarian told me when I said, it's too emotionally painful to be a doctor, I'm going to be a veterinarian. And he said, people bring the pets in. And he got me to understand you have to learn how to care for people, and help them. So he was one of my patients, but also became my therapist, and not just treating disease, but help the people. And it was very different to do that. And I think we all have to learn to say no and use our lifetime properly.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I did say no to many management decisions. Sometimes I was overruled. Other times I was able to. I was able to convince them. But that's one of the reasons I left nursing, because I was overruled on some key decisions that cost people their lives, cost them their dignity at the end of their lives, and that was too much for me to take. So that was why I left the nursing profession.
Yeah, it was easier for me as a doctor because the MD, gave me a lot of power. I mean, it upset a lot of other doctors more, but still, I was on equal footing with them. So, they couldn't say, "What does he know?" Or I had the education. But in with medical students, when you say draw yourself working as a doctor, many of the students don't have people in the picture. They have all the equipment. The majority draw themselves sitting behind a desk with a diploma on the wall. Again, there's nobody sitting in the office with them. And it's the extremely rare student who shows what being a doctor is handing someone a tissue. You don't have to touch them with an instrument. You help them as a person. And as I say, I think that's the part that I became a doctor because I liked people and wanted to help them. And then I was in big pain, especially as a surgeon when you're directly involved. But I think we all need to understand ourselves better. And then we'll all get along with each other. I say, because if you run a restaurant, people come in. If you fix electricity and plumbing, people, houses. So you can either be miserable because of the people, or you can enjoy the people. And we're all wounded. That's something else I've learned that helps me to relate to people and not get upset with them, because I know they're wounded. And that's why they're acting the way they do. So I always saying to people, use love as a weapon, because people really don't know how to deal with love if they haven't experienced it. When you say I love you to somebody, they look at you like, what do I do with him now? He's not fighting, yelling, screaming. He's saying, I love you.
Yeah.
And I have to say, a lot of my reading is those kinds of spiritual things where you find these wonderful stories of people who chose love and what they're like. I have to tell you the end of one story. This is a man who's totally loving, though his life is hell. And when he gets to heaven, you see, they have like a trial. They have a prosecutor and defending attorney, talk about your life and where you're going to go. And the defending attorney has all these wonderful things to say about him, that even when doctors would treat him terribly, he was so nice to his doctor. And the prosecuting attorney, who's to get up and say bad things, has nothing to say. He just says, gentlemen, I don't have anything to say. So they say to the guy, well, you're in heaven and you can have anything you want. Really? Yeah. What would you like in heaven? You can have anything here. And he says, well, I'd like a hot muffin and butter for breakfast every day. That's his answer. And that's, the kind of loving, sweet man, that's all he asks for when he's got heaven, in front of him. And I think that's what I find, though. A man, you see, that when somebody responds in that way, it's very hard for the inquisitor, to punish him, and the prosecutor, because and after he says that, it says the angels were embarrassed and the prosecutor laughed. See, this guy was more of an angel than the angels. Yeah. So the story ends with the angels were embarrassed and the prosecutor smiles. Yeah.
That's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
I used the Little Soul in the Sun with my nephews. I think that's I don't know if you've come across that with Neil Donald Walsh. Another very powerful one. But I find it interesting, Bernie, that you're talking to nurses, because my experience is that over here in England, that the sickness and absenteeism amongst nurses is higher than most other sectors. Yeah. And that self-love in the nursing profession, in the medical profession, is probably lower than possibly any other profession. How do you explain that?
Surgeons have a higher suicide rate than the general population here in the United States. I think that, again, the nurses are so busy trying to help others, they drain themselves. They need to love themselves. I tell people to put shrines in their house and put their own baby pictures up and love themselves. As you go through the house, give yourself that love. But I really think a lot of nurses are in nursing to give. I mean, they did it because they care about others, but then they forget to take care of themselves. Yeah. As I said, at this nursing convention, 95% of the nurses said they would do something they didn't want to do. I almost fell off the stage. I couldn't believe that number, would respond that way. But you see, if they get sick, if they have their own wounds, then they start taking care of themselves. They learn. But I always say it's better to learn from the wisdom of others than it is from your own disaster. Because you look at how many, I have to laugh sometimes. Yes, I keep writing books too, but I mean, so many people write books after, you see, they get a disease, a divorce, lose their job, whatever. Now I'll help everybody. But the information is already there. It was there for the last few thousand years, from the great sages of the past. We're all saying the same damn thing. And in some of my books, I've said, I have nothing new to tell you. I can make it more modern so you know how to apply it to your life, but this is not anything new. It's the same themes. And that's what I always look for, common themes. Whether it's coming out of the Bible, Buddha, or anything else, if we're all saying the same thing, then it must work because we've all come to that, conclusion.
If you could change one thing in hospital system, what would it be?
Wow. I'd say it would be to teach people how to be what I call survivors. Because I tried to do a lot of these things years ago, and the administration didn't want to spend money, like videos to train people. I mean, if you're going to have surgery tomorrow, let's visualize it being successful. And let's have other people say to you, oh, yes, I've had surgery. This is what helped me. This is what, so you can do that. I mean, I did a lot of children's surgery, operated on my own children, our own children. One of them woke up after surgery and said, you forgot to tell me it was going to hurt. I mean, how could a surgeon, but I show him the hospital, introduce him to all the nurses and the anesthesiologists and the people, and then he wakes up and says, you didn't tell me it was going to hurt. See, that's what we need to help them with that experience. Because what I've seen also is when somebody draws their treatment as hell, like an operating room is a black box with nobody in it, and you're lying on the table all alone. But if they picture themselves 4 or 5 times a day going to the hospital, having surgery, waking up, feeling fine, and going home, a week later, the picture's totally different. I mean, it's this beautiful healing scene with family, doctors, God. It's a room full of love, whereas a week ago it was empty. So again, that's what I would say. Hospitals can become places of training to teach you, how to get through things in a way that is not filled with fear and pain and everything else. See, what I also learned, if we trained everybody in the hospital and how to communicate and talk, it would be very different. Because I found how powerful my words were to the patients. They had faith in me, believed in me. So I could lie to them for their benefit. And they wouldn't get mad at me because less pain, got better faster, because I put it in, different words. In simple terms, especially with kids, if you rub them with an alcohol sponge and said, these are new sponges that numb your skin, a third of the kids have anesthesia. They've been hypnotized. And they wonder why other doctors don't use that. The other kids will say it still hurt, but it's not an emotional, oh, here comes the needle kind of, they'd relax, lie back, expecting not to hurt. And then they'd say, oh, it still, I felt it, you see. So in that way, I would use words. Like an anesthesiologist says, you'll be going out. Well, going out of control is not fun. But I would immediately say, yeah, how does it feel to go out on a date? When was your last date? See, then people are smiling, thinking about something pleasant, and it changes their chemistry. That's what we have to realize. The emotions become a body chemistry.
Yeah. Well, I found pretty much the same thing. I mean, as a nurse, we were very restricted of what we could give, and often paracetamol was the answer to everything. So I understand that completely.
I mean, I'd have to go out of the room to get it, but one of our kids took a canvas and put the word words, 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 words all over it. And you realize if you write words, 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 they become swords. When he brought it home from school, that really, wow. I mean, it was like he was doing therapy for me. And I realized I can pick up a scalpel and kill or cure you. And I can kill or cure you with words. And I mean that literally. That I've watched people die when words have taken hope away. And I've watched people survive when I've given them hope through my words. Yeah. The word potential is the one I use. That you're not a statistic. So who knows what the future will bring.
So I know we're moving to a very controversial area now, Bernie, but I thought this for a while. I mean, effectively, the power of words and doctors' status, I mean, often are they not guilty of manslaughter, albeit without knowing it?
Yeah, absolutely. In some cases, I know families that have sued because they have refused care, saying somebody's going to be dead in 3 months or 6 months. They don't want to spend money on something. And the man went home, got in bed, and died in a week. Yeah. I mean, I know 2 men, I mean, there are more, but who were told they can't work by their doctors. They're too sick. One went home and committed suicide. The other was sitting in the office in front of me with his wife and 2 children saying, there's no point in living. I can't work anymore. And I said to him, you have a wife and 2 children sitting next to you. Aren't they important? I mean, it was like, oh, I never thought of that. But so many men are just into the physical. The women don't die because they have children. I mean, the women live longer than men with the same cancer. But then I watch them die when the kids leave home, see? So I try to empower them too. I mean, we each need an authentic life. Not I'm mama, I'm the wage earner, to have an authentic life. So the kids could leave home, okay. You still have things to do. And pets too. I mean, I have a house full, my wife and I. But again, it's the relationships and studies, you see. Yeah. One doctor in Australia said after a heart attack, the people who went home to a house with a dog, a year later, 5% had died. There was no dog in the house, 26% had died. So he said we would save millions of dollars if we made everybody in Australia get a dog. You know, I mean, he had a sense of humor, but it's the connections and what they studied. I'm looking around because the dog is somewhere. But if you pet a dog, your oxytocin and serotonin levels go up, the bonding hormones. So again, it's all the relationships that are a part of it. Yeah. And I saw a lot of people with cancer who had houses full of animals that the family thought they had to get rid of. And I would always say, no, you get rid of them. You know, mama dies.
Yeah.
Because she had 12 cats. I said, but if you have 12 cats, you can't die. Nobody wants, you see, tell her, nobody wants to take them. Go clean the house, but keep them there. Yeah, and then mama goes on living because I have 12 cats to take care of.
Wow. What's your, when I ask this question, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? You've obviously written a book on miracles. What's the biggest miracle that you've seen, the most impactful one?
What I think is significant, because I keep reading and rereading my own books to learn from them, because a lot of times there's wisdom in them that I wasn't ready to be aware of. The way I read Joseph Campbell, too. If I read some of his books every couple of years, new things jump off the page. But I'd say what struck me about the book as I was rereading it was when people chose life. In other words, what the biblical message is. I place before you life and death, good and evil. Choose life. That means what you're choosing is good for everyone. It's not just good for me. And that when they chose life, then the miracles happen. They weren't just thinking about themselves. So, I mean, I could start telling stories that were in there. But that's, I would say, is the message to people. Choose life. Now, how you do it, I always say, is up to you. In other words, not somebody telling you what they want you to be when you grow up, you know, but you pick your profession. You want to be a musician, you want to be a lawyer, you want, you know, whatever you want to do, choose it. But choose it as your way of meeting people and loving the world. Yeah, I was reading something this morning, you know, that life is like God's gift to us, but how we help others is our gift, you know, like our payment back to God. Yeah. So choose that life and pay back.
So life would be more about connection and service.
Yeah, yeah. So we're all, well, I always say as a surgeon too, we're one family, all the same color inside.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's a very true point.
If you ask children, I mean little ones, where are we all the same? So if I had a photograph of one of you, you couldn't tell what it is. They immediately say our hearts, our insides. I mean, these are kids, you know, 8, 9 years old. You say to adults, because I was standing with a black minister not too long ago, and I said to his friends, I got a picture of one of us, and you can't tell what it is, which one of us it is. What's it a picture of? And they looked at me like I'm insane. You know, he's black, you're white. How can we not tell? The minister, sweet man, he immediately said, our hearts. You see, and I said, right. I knew he'd know the answer. And that's what we have to realize. I say we're one family. We're different outside, so we know each other. You know what I mean? That you're not serving dinner to total strangers to see if we all looked alike. So you know your family. But there's still a part of us that's all the same. And I think animals are more complete and understand that. You know, how many emails you get of, you know, goats being raised by tigers and, you know, all these, because they're just there with that affection and that love, and they care for each other, and we're judging each other. Yeah.
It sort of makes a mockery of us being the most intelligent form of life, really, doesn't it?
You're breaking up a little bit. It's hard to...
Oh, sorry, Bernie. I said it sort of makes a mockery of us being the most intelligent life form.
Yeah. That's why a rabbi said in the Hebrew, the word tov, it was translated as good. You know, everything God created, God said was good. But he said it should be complete. And after God is created, you don't see that word. You know, it's like, I mean, after man is created, God didn't say it was good. And what God is saying is that we're not complete, but that makes what we do meaningful. You see, you know, when the tiger raises a little pig, you say, oh, isn't that nice? Yeah. But if we step forward and rescue one another, there's a lot more meaning behind it, because you know it's your conscious thought about it.
And that is pretty miraculous, really.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who are watching this and want to feel better, want to get this sense of connection? What's the one thing that they could do right now and take away and integrate into their daily life that would make the biggest difference for them?
Well, as I said, that we're all wounded. I tell a lot of people to put a bandage over their eye and go to work or go shopping and watch how many people talk to you because you have a visible wound. The author Thornton Wilder said, see, an angel refuses to heal a doctor. And the doctor says, why? Just because I'm a doctor? He said, no. He says, I got troubles too. I know. But without your wound, where would your power be? See, and he finishes with, in love service, only the wounded soldier can serve, draw back. So the doctor goes home. He's not healed. But on the way home, all these people are shouting at him, come in my house, come in my house, come in my house. Because the only person, you know, that our daughter talks to is you. Our son sits in the dark, he only talks to you. And the doctor realizes because of his woundedness, he is a good doctor. All these people know he understands them and their pain. And so, again, I'd say share your wounds and don't be afraid. You know, don't hide them, but share them. One of the things I used to say with humor, thinking it was funny, when people would say to me, how are you? I'd say, I'm depressed. I'm out of my antidepressant. My doctor's away on vacation, so I can't refill my prescription. And my wife said to me one day, you think it's a joke, but the people don't. You're not listening to them. And she woke me up. People were offering me their antidepressants, telling me how terrible they felt. You know, and I realized the world is wounded. And I'm laughing, and they're, you know, in pain. And I mean it. Their pocketbooks are opened, and they say, will these help you? You see, because I have said that I am wounded, and then they come, and that's what I've learned too. When people respond to me, I always say, I know your life story. You've had a life-threatening illness, a major loss, or loving parents. And they always say, yes, you know, you're right on all scores. Because they're coming from that place, you know. If love didn't make them open to sharing, then the pain of their own experience did. But those are the people who give you a hug and help you, you know, when you share your wounds and pain.
I'd just like to thank you, Bernie, for talking to us, and also give you an opportunity for people who have watched this, who are inspired by what you've said. How do they connect with you, and what would you advise them is their next step forward?
I mean, if people want to connect with me,
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say through the website is the best way, and email me, the Bernie Siegel, SIEGELMD.com. I mean, all my books, many of my articles, CDs, everything's listed there. So there's a lot they can read, you know, that I've had to share there too. And if they email, it comes to me. I don't have a staff separating me from the people. So, yeah, and I mean, my books are in every language all over the world. It really has touched my heart. Because the other day I got some in Chinese. You know, the house is filled with books in foreign languages, but it tells me how we're all wounded and we all need this. You know, the Watkins books in London, you know, put me in the upper 20, now I think I'm 25th, of, you know, spiritual healers, living spiritual healers on the planet. And that really, as I say, touches me because I call it spreading the seeds, that your word goes out and you help so many people around the world just by trying to do something to help your patients, if you know what I mean. But the ripples just keep spreading.
That's fantastic. And I'd just like to emphasize that. I contacted you via your website and you got straight back to me. So thank you, Bernie. It makes you very approachable, very human.
Thank you.
In this day of technological madness.
People do, that I come from my heart. So if they don't see punctuation and capitals, not to worry. It's still me. Some people think I have somebody working for me who doesn't, you know, who is a little bit disabled, you know, and doesn't get the right English. But again, it's like my heart is typing, if you know what I mean. It isn't worried about getting the punctuation right. It's worried about sharing the right message. Yeah, I mean, the line from the song, let your heart make up your mind. That's the best advice I would give people. Love your life, love your body, and let your heart make up your mind.
That's a brilliant way to end this interview. Thank you,
Thank
Bernie.
you.
And I'd like to say, on behalf of me, Adam Shaw, be healthier, be happier, and have some fun along the way.
Bless you.
Thanks, Bernie.